question people want to know, is there some vast conspiracy involved? And I would say science is agenda driven. Science is very closed-minded, if you will. There's a non-holistic approach. Science was reconfigured after the Dark Ages, and they lost all the wisdom of the Library of Alexandria or the intuition of the great mystics. Like Pythagoras was like this flamboyant and mystical sage who would heal people. And he was a vegetarian who basically fasted and meditated. You know, these weren't guys just in a lab all the time. They were intertwined with the mystical realms. So we have, like I said, a reconfiguration of science that occurred in the late 1800s. But there was a lot of racism at the time. And the idea that Native Americans had a grand and incredible past was diminished and dismissed and marginalized. You can't destroy a culture and revere it at the same time. So Native people were portrayed as unremarkable, nomadic, unsophisticated, where we know the reverse is true. They built geometric forms, pyramids of earth, sophisticated math and geometry, just like the British Isles and Sumeria and the Mayan Empire. All around the world, the same wisdom was shared. So the Native people had this incredible past. And the story you get of the Smithsonian is just like, oh, you know, they're hiding all the evidence in the warehouse. Now, I'm not saying there isn't funny business going on, but your rank and file anthropologist and archaeologist, I'm not going to throw under the bus. I'm just going to say it's like your doctor. They study like an allopathic form of archaeology where everything is symbolism. They don't say, wow, this figure, this hybrid figure with like a strange man bag is carved and revered as a culture hero all around the planet. Should we look further into that? Could this be a reality? No, it's like, these people were strange and superstitious and just didn't understand, you know, hard and fast science. And I disagree with that. So one of the heads of anthropology, or the first head of anthropology, was Dr. Herlichka for the Smithsonian. And he was a hardcore racist. I'm not going to get into all his quotes that are despicable, but the guy was a real a-hole. And he was the one who declared giants no more in the 30s. Although the Smithsonian's own records, I will show, had many accounts of giant skeletons found by their own scientists. Now, this is the first head of the Eastern Mounds Division. This is Powell of Grand Canyon excavation fame. And he had this old world view of thinking everything, you know, basically the natives were savage and barbarous, and we were the civilized ones, say the white interlopers in the United States. So it's the same old tired racist idea about Native people or African Americans. And this is what they based their basically evolution on. It was this weird mix of science and racism. And you can't really trust too much of what was going on at the time. But this is when all these theories were formed. So the Smithsonian gets giant skulls. It is listed in academic journals. They send their scientists out. They find over 7-foot skeletons, over 8-foot skeletons. They essentially find that there was the remnants of giants among the native people. Even all the early explorers encountered giant people in Patagonia, in Virginia with John Smith, Coronado, DeSoto, Tuscaloosa in Alabama. Him and his son were over 8 foot tall, as noted by the chroniclers. All the early explorers say the same thing. Now here's a Smithsonian ethnology report, one of many. And within it, there's a 7.5 foot skeleton, 19 inches across the chest by Professor Norris. It was written about here. And it shows up in the New York Times. And here's another one, over 8 foot tall. I don't know what 20 teeth is all about. That skeleton in the front is close to 7.5 foot tall. This is in Nelson Mound. Look at all the beehive mounds in North Carolina. Right here, over 9 foot skeleton. Burial mound of giant race holds secret. And many of these were either dug up by Smithsonian scientists or sent to the Smithsonian. And here's my favorite account found by my buddy Micah Ewer. In 1873, T.M. Perrin, the Smithsonian archaeologist, reports in Illinois, the skulls are very large but fall to pieces upon being exposed to the air. One skull was found that measured 36 inches in circumference. That is absolutely enormous. I mean, a normal skull is, you know, probably 40, 30% of that. So the point is, many of these skulls were found. They were absolutely enormous, found by a Smithsonian scientist. But because this idea is like, it's like religion and politics. I will yield nothing to the other side. Now, the biblical-oriented people will say giants existed. It's in the Bible. The skeptic or the academic will say that's a bunch of nonsense. And I'm not going to even, yield an inch, because that means evolution is wrong. That means there was a supernatural aspect at work where humans and giants were created by an extraterrestrial race. My colleagues will mock me endlessly if I even talk about that. So I've given up my hope of being respected in mainstream circles, and I am just geared towards the truth, and I do it through the means of comparative analysis. So a few of the sources that claim giants is a historical reality: Rosicrucians, Freemasons, Theosophists, the Bible, other religious documents, Casey Steiner, and oral traditions around the world. Now, what all those sources also say, oddly enough, is that Atlantis was a historical reality, existed in the middle of the Atlantic, was destroyed 12,600 to 800 years ago, verified by the Younger Dryas impact event, and that these androgynous created gods created giants that were part of the population of Atlantis, and some of them survived after the flood. They all say that, which is extremely odd because they come from different backgrounds, secret societies, mystics. They are not in contact with each other through ages of time. Even Plato talks about Atlantis, the Great Flood, and androgynous gods creating humans, which nobody knows about because we only listen to the sane stuff that Plato said. So it's really fascinating undercurrent here. And the idea of giants is linked inexorably to megalithic construction, as Hugh talked about. Now, here is Sacsayhuaman in Peru. Now, I'm a stonemason and an engineer, so I'll get into what I think about these sites. So the Inca specifically told the Spaniards that Sacsayhuaman was not built by them, but the giants, that the giants were the one who built these incredible stone structures. This isn't like wishful thinking. These are noted in the chroniclers' diaries that the Inca told them specifically about this. So that's what they have to say about, you would think if it's part of their past, there'd be this proud tradition of like, yes, our ancestors built this. No, the Viracochas, the giants, the flood survivors built these incredible stone structures. Now, the entire world is littered with inexplicable stone structures. And if you landed on this planet from another world, you would say, oh my God, the past of this place is so bizarre. There clearly was an advanced civilization and a lost world. And the science is like a bad superstition that believes in gradualism or uniformitarianism, and none of them make sense. Like, you have a story, like, why doesn't everything fit neatly into this idea of modern science? Instead, we have these wild and bizarre stories in our mythology, in our oral traditions, in our religious documents that tell a completely different story. So here you see Sacsayhuaman. I'll go back here for a sec. One of the ideas is that the molecular bonds of these stones were weakened and that these sites were built by a technology that is now lost to us. Now, I'll give Edgar Cayce, the great mystic's take on it. Now, Cayce was a mystic who lived, he was born in 1877, lived in Kentucky. You probably know about him already. He is the godfather of holistic medicine, and he had many readings in a trance-like state about Atlantis. And this is one of the readings that he gave. He was asked the question, give a few details regarding the physiognomy, habits, customs, and costumes of the people of Atlantis just before the first destruction. They took on many sizes as to stature, from that as may be called the midget to the giants, for there were giants in the earth in those days, men as tall as what would be termed today 10 to 12 feet in stature and well proportioned throughout. Now, he specifically notes that they were part of the Atlantean population, and Steiner says the same thing, Madame Blavatsky, and all these other sources. So this is the story of Viracocha, the androgynous god, that he made earth and sky, fashioned from stone a race of giants. Displeased with them, he turned some of the giants back into stone and destroyed the rest in a flood. Now, what Cayce says is that Viracocha is a descendant from Atlantis, and that the Atlantean colonists landed in Sacsayhuaman and Cusco and around Pumapunku, and they are the ones that created the incredible megalithic sites. Now, as a stonemason, I see a level of expertise that is beyond the capabilities of the people of the time. You have these incredible fits. You have miles of seams that you can't get a micron between them. Forget about a razor blade. You have cataclysmic evidence like this staircase flipped upside down at Sacsayhuaman. Ollantaytambo, this is, I think it's granite or andesite. I'm not sure. It's a particularly hard stone. But look at the shims, the earthquake shims that are flawless. That is so hard to do. I can't tell you. You could have the tools of the time, and I could have 1,000 years, and I could not duplicate that. And the master masons on the planet could not do that. That to me, it's an episode idea for a future show, is to take some blocks of the available stone with the available tools and see if these can be recreated. I believe not. I will stick whatever reputation I have behind that. And you look, and the stone almost seems to be softened and reshaped. And these are just astounding megalithic structures. Ollantaytambo here. They interlock in the back. This requires planning and mathematics and engineering. And Casey said they were built by Atlantean colonists using light, sound, and levitation technology. And Casey, in fact, says that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was built in 12,400 to 12,300 BC by Atlantean colonists who used the same technology. Now, we know through studying the work of Chris Dunn and others, there is high technology all around Egypt as well. I'm not saying all the pyramids are that old, but some structures appear to be built right after the last flood. Now, I'm just showing you different images of this kind of stonework. You see the Inca stonework and then the megalithic stuff after it. Polygonal walls, incredible fits. The appearance of the softening of stone as well. Here's Brian Forrester and I on a tour discussing this. This was in the 50s. Archaeologists found this in Cusco. They found an Inca wall in front of the ancient megalithic wall built by the Viracochas. Now, this is proof, there are so many examples of this, that the Inca built this kind of, mediocre stonework that, me and a crew of 20 guys had whipped together or something like that. The stuff behind it is a different matter as well. So what happened was they removed the entire wall, and this is what it looks like today. And the far upper left, that lousy stonework is the Spanish stuff. The pre-Incan megalithic stuff is in front, and the Inca megalithic wall is gone. So that is a kind of a tell that this ancient stuff is much more sophisticated, which flies in the face of normal progressions of technological evolution. Here we have the Temple of the Sun, Coricancha. It looks like a CNC machine made this vault, if you will. At Machu Picchu, the same thing. It's like the stuff was easy. It was like showing off almost, because you couldn't pull a lot of the stonework off in the way it was supposed to be done. When the first Spanish chroniclers arrived with Pizarro, the Inca explained that Tiwanaku had been constructed by a race of giants called Huaris before the period of darkness and was already in ruins before their own civilization began. So all these ancient sources in isolated areas are saying the same thing about the megalithic construction. They had no means of communication. I find that extremely curious that they all cook up the same story, if you will, that giants built these ancient sites. Now, Tiwanaku has been dated much earlier by Arthur Poznansky and others. I will just say that his Poznansky there, that the expertise at the site, the stonework expertise is astonishing. Here's Pumapunku. Here's me with my awesome cat shirt. And these planes that I see are evidence of some kind of machining, if you will. Now, the tools aren't there, so there's a lot of consternation about how they were built. And once again, Casey says these people developed this almost mystical technology of levitation and cutting and stone softening that doesn't leave tools behind. And, I'll just put that out there, that it's a really compelling argument that Casey makes. So we find these giant skulls in Bolivia. We find elongated skulls all around the world. Now, I'll stop for a second and say the entire planet is littered with elongated skulls. It is the most extreme and bizarre thing to do to your child, like cradle board them. And just to say that they all independently created that, extreme adaptation or manipulation by themselves, that doesn't make any sense. Now, I've talked to very well-respected anthropologists, and they kind of brush it off, and I'm like, no way. I mean, isolated Pacific Islands, native tribes, Middle East, this is everywhere. And the obvious truth is they're emulating somebody. They're emulating the creator gods or some beings. Even the Adena people, the giants of the eastern half of the United States, their royal class elongated their skulls. And they're the ones found in the burial mounds that were giant. And here we have some natives in the Toltec region of Mexico. This is an ancient codex that shows them putting to death a giant. And there were many of these accounts of Mexico as well, over 10-foot tall skeletons. All around the world, once again, isolated Pacific Islands, Nan Madol, we have this incredible structure. And we have this American Geographical Society account about Captain Coffin finding, ironically, he visited the vaults and he took from it several bones of gigantic size. Now, he was one of the first ones to encounter the ancient tombs at Nam Madol, this Micronesian island, and he found giant bones. And the native people there don't go to the site. Now, that's not just hocus pocus. My friend Al taught English in Nan Madol in the 50s, and he got a piece of fruit from the ancient ruins. He took it back, and the natives who don't go there say, throw it away, it's cursed. That was the giants and the twin brother giants built this site, and they used levitation. That is the oral tradition there. You can find it on the internet, this fascinating backstory that the giants built this incredible megalithic site on this pinpoint of an island in the middle of the Pacific. And it's like 50-foot tall basalt megalithic structures, like 200 million tons of stone carried from the other side of the island. If I did it, I would hope to have levitation technology. But once again, they're telling the same story. We go down to Patagonia. For hundreds of years, giants were reported by the explorers like Magellan, 7, 8, 9-foot tall giants. They're in maps. They're in fact in this Frederick Cook article. Cook wrote about this in the late 1800s, about the Ona people. And he met them in Patagonia. They were between 6 and 7.5 feet tall, wore animal skins, and they lived simply. And here are some pictures that he has. A 6'6" woman and a 7'6" male. He has many pictures like this. Now, these people represent an anthropological mystery. They are much bigger and much taller than modern day humans. And they were exterminated by the British in the late 1800s, which is another part of this story. A lot of the native people were decimated by war and manifest destiny and diseases. And they held not just the genetic clues, but the oral history clues of a lot of this giant survivor evidence, if you will. Hugh talked about this account of Captain Allen in Sicily, right? So I'm just going to add that James Allen was the captain who found this strange skeleton over 10 foot tall with hieroglyphs from this lost age. And he gave a, and here's the account here, but he also gave us a sworn statement attesting to the truth when he got back in Philadelphia. So he went out of his way to say, I found this giant skeleton, and here's the account of it. And I found the all these different accounts from his attorney and everything like that, where he verifies this find. And hearkening back to this age, so it is worthy of notice that the Cyclops, a race of men of gigantic stature referred to these ancients, were in the western parts of Sicily. Hugh showed some of these sites already. I'll show a couple more slides. All associated with the giants, the Cyclops, the megalithic building, this interconnected Cyclopean style of stonework is shared all around the planet once again. And when you ask the ancient chroniclers, they say it was a race of giants. So in the Bible, Samuel 21:20, there was a giant from Gath, and he has 6 fingers on every hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits in all. Now, this is a trait associated with giants across the world that I'll show you. The first mention of polydactyl, extra digits, it's Nasuma Ibzu. So 2,800 tetralogical almonds were found at Ashpurnabal in Nineveh. That was about 2800 BC. The library of Ashurnabal was from about 1700 BC. Here are some of the tablets at the British Museum. So they talk about on the tablets, they're very specifically talking about 6 fingers and 6 toes. And this is always associated with the divine, supernatural, or malevolent all around the planet. So right here, you have a votive child's foot with 6 toes. And on the right, you have the Sumo Ibzu from 2800 BC. Oh, I'm sorry, 26th century BC. What am I to do for my child with 6 toes? It's like this supernatural trait. This guy has 27 digits in all. There are, like Hugh was saying, people get their double rows of teeth removed when they're younger. Oftentimes, there are many people who are born polydactylous with extra digits, and they have them removed as well. This guy clearly didn't. This is a trait that lives on in humans. Now, oddly enough, the mystic Edgar Cayce associates this trait with Atlantis and Lemuria. Lemuria was the Pacific Atlantis, this other lost world that was destroyed in 50,000 BC. So anyways, he says that Muzuin traveled to the Gobi Desert in 9026 BC, and that he was 6 feet tall, blue-eyed, hair dark gold, hand 6-figured. It's not always associated with giants. Oftentimes it is, but you'll see sometimes it's associated as well as the giants with this lost world. Now, in the Gobi Desert, ironically, recently they found the Tarim Basin mummies between 6 foot tall and 6 foot 6 inches tall, where they have Caucasoid traits, blue eyes, yellow hair, red hair. So these very large mummies that were Caucasoid are found right where Cayce said the Lemurians showed up in ancient times. A lot of what Cayce said was posthumously verified by science and continues to be this day.